Ron, she's someplace fun. Maybe watch one way. Not she getting rid of the chart. Oh, you need a charger. Yeah. Right here. Do we thought we had one for server pro?
You can go.
I thought we had a spare one.
Hey, Mark, when you do this proclamation, read it and then sign it. I'll give you a pen when I come up front. You can sign it whenever you want. Yeah, that works. That works.
It feels worse. Thanks anyway. For other people.
I don't know why I'm here. You just took away my whole job.
For July the 6th, 2023. This is a regular scheduled meeting. And with that, Ryan, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Dem.
Here.
Counselor Schachter.
Here.
Counselor Weimer.
Here.
Counselor Zawinski. Counselor Godis.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ryan. And I also want to point out that we have Councilor Hanlon and Lieutenant Hassel in the room with us tonight and a whole bunch of staff members for the record. So thank you for being here. And she's not here quite yet, but
She's looking for Jonathan's charging.
oh, and
Already got
Dr.
one.
Marshall, city manager, is also here. And she gets back. Item 6 on our agenda tonight would be the agenda changes and conflicts. And we're going to use the button here, and I'm going to have to figure it out as we go, but I'm sure we can do it. So I'm good now. After all. Any agenda changes or conflicts? Council. We'll see none. We'll move on to council announcements. Any council announcements? No, also none. Excellent. Moving on, item 8, citizens appearing before council for items that are not on the agenda. If you have something, please step forward, state your name and whether you live in the city or not, and you get 3 minutes. Please watch the timer. It's in the bottom of the screen.
My name is Don Gillespie. I live here in Glenwood. I read an email today that kind of shook me up a little bit from Hannah Klausman, who is the Director of Community Development, which is awful new to me. It seems to have a lot of authority. And when she talked about the 8th Street and Midland project, that she says, I chose to elevate this project to a planning and zoning commission review due to the sensitivity of the project as that a formal public hearing could be held, as opposed to only a public notice that is required at this level. Planning and zoning commission, the final approving authority, and therefore the project has been approved. City council does not review projects of this size. That's a shaker. I tried to present the case of 05 CV 119 to the P&Z in their last meeting, but the gentleman who sat in for Carl, I guess, denied them to see it. And his reason being that it was a poor quality. Well, the first page was faded. So I thought I'd read you some of the things in there that I wanted them to see. But this is where the CDOT and the city condemned that property back in 2005. It is therefore necessary that petitioners acquire the hereafter described interest in real property for the construction of said highway improvements. And by the way, one of the requirements or criteria for condemning property is that you're going to use it for public use. Said property shall be exempt from taxation the date that petitions are granted possession. Therefore, so long as it is used for state highway or other public purposes pursuant to, and I won't read you the little Colorado State. Petitions require possession of the property which is the subject of this action as soon as reasonably possible in order to proceed with the construction of the highway improvement. And that was all this work that was being done on 8th Street. And the thing that catches my eye is when did the city stop or start paying taxes for this property? Because it was tax exempt so long as it was used for public use. So if they started paying taxes on this property a year after, or 2 years after, or 6 months after, that means it was used for public use in my eye. But I'm curious, are you still tax exempt for this property, or did you start paying taxes on it? Because if you haven't paid taxes on it, it looks like you owe the state a lot of money because y'all are saying it was never used for public use. And I just think you're jumping into something here that the public should have an input with and should have a vote on. Because today I looked at the smoke out there and got to thinking, this is one of our big emergency exits.
3 minutes are up, but you made your point. Thank you very much.
It keeps turning me off. I'll try to keep it on. So anyway, thank you. Thank you for stepping forward. Anybody else would like to come forward, please?
Hello, Lori Chase, 705 Cowden Drive. What a surprise. I was not able to go to planning and zoning meeting, and I was under the understanding that you could go to this public comment and have your comments heard and respected and voted with them in mind. This did not happen. And I did not know that 8 units was the deciding factor of whether or not the public could have actual input. So I'm going to start there. And the city is responsible primarily for the safety and infrastructure of this community. All cities are. And what I'm going to express to you is the insufficient ingress and egress into Cowden as it exists right now. There's an enormous blind spot when you try to leave that area. If you pull out far enough to be able to see the traffic coming up from town, you are now blocking the intersection for the pedestrians and bicycles. So I've had to pull up and then pull back several times on some occasions, depending on the bicycle traffic and pedestrian traffic. It's heavily traveled. There is not enough parking within the neighborhood, especially since the changes made to the parking, and we can't park on most of the area in that neighborhood, except for I have a couple of spots where I've dug out in my own hill. So the vacant lot is overgrown and is a fire hazard. The city is now not in compliance with its own code. So that needs to be addressed immediately. It's probably 36 inches in some spots, and green stuff burns. So I don't want to be in that path since we already have those problems anyway. We currently have 4 multifamily projects in various stages of construction. There's one out by Discount Tire. There's one on Blake by Walmart, over in front of the Glenwood Vet on Highway 82 and the Meadows. We have 1 grocery store. We have a small health food store. The fire, police, and hospital already are understaffed. Why are we doing this it endangers the citizens. It puts them at risk when there's not enough people to put out fires, when there's not enough people to enforce the laws. It endangers the police and it endangers the public. When you start endangering your own workers that are here to save us in case of an emergency, it just doesn't work. You can't have them doing that. We already have problems at the hospitals, already understaffed. And given, moving on to another thing, given the density of Cowden, Overland, and Davis, we need open space in that spot. No, we need a real traffic thing. No, I tried to talk fast. Okay,
Thank you so much.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming forward and voicing your concerns. Anybody else would like to come forward?
Hello, Jennifer Vanian up on Minter. I'm coming out in support of hoping council can at least look at the roundabout idea that David Howder has drawn up. It's a beautiful plan. I'm sure he would be willing to share it with you.
Timer's not on. Not for
And
you,
I'm
that's for the,
I'm just in support of that roundabout right there at the corner of Midland and 8th. It looks like a really solid plan. So hopefully you could just look at it before you move forward with other plans.
okay, thank you very much. Anybody else like to come forward? And let's see if we can reset the timer and hopefully it'll start this time.
Okay,
There
here
we
we go. Hi, Jeannie Galay, 1125 Red Mountain Drive. I work at Colorado Mountain College Foundation and on scholarships and fundraising. And one of the scholarships that I manage is the Storm King 14 Memorial Scholarship. It's fortuitous that I happen to be here today, which is the 29th anniversary of the fire. So next year is the 30th anniversary. And I work with family members of the fallen 14. The scholarship was created by the city. It's kind of a unique one that I manage. It doesn't go to students attending CMC unless they're in the 3rd category and they're pursuing fire science. It's primarily for survivors, family members of the fallen 14. And it's a fairly modest endowment. It yields about $1,500 a year. And so oftentimes we break it into 2 gifts to 2 different students, about $750. Not a hugely impactful amount of money for college tuition. I work with committee members, a selection committee, Bernadette Julick and Bill Kite are on the committee. Anyway, it's a wonderful thing. It's a great thing that we do at the city and that the city does. And I work with many of the family members. So I was talking to one of the Davis Fletch's mother, and she had attended a fundraiser last year in Boise, Idaho, that was promoted or put on by the Forest Service, a firefighting agency. And she was a keynote speaker, and it was a very successful event, and it raised about $25,000 or $30,000. And they used her story, and it was very compelling. And I just thought it would be really cool to do a fundraiser to increase the endowment up to an amount of $50,000 that would then generate a little more meaningful amount of support for these students and families. And I know of a donor who has offered to potentially put forth a challenge grant of $20,000. And that donor would match, try to bring that money in, put that money up to bring in some other matches. And so I just want to put this idea out there to you all and everybody in the Zoom world, that I think it would be a really cool thing. And it's going to be the 30th. This community, they come back to our town, they're inexorably linked with Glenwood Springs. They always will be. And, they make a pilgrimage here, and fire is top of mind around here. I think it would be a really cool thing, potentially do some fire education, partner with the agencies, Forest Service, different firefighting agencies in the community, and get some sponsors and raise some money and just bump up that endowment a little bit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeannie. Thank you very much. Anybody else like to come forward for the 3 minutes? Please state your name.
Thank you. I'm Steve Smith, I live in Glenwood Springs. I'm here on behalf of Glenwood Springs Bicycle Advocates with an enthusiastic appreciation for the city of Glenwood Springs help with Bike Their Day, Glenwood Springs version of the Colorado statewide Bike to Work Day on June 28th. It was a lot of fun, but it was also a measurable success. 235 cyclists rode out for a free breakfast and some camaraderie and to find a new way to get to where they were going. That represents a 40% increase over participation last year. It also represents in this town, 1.3% of the entire cadre of cyclists across Colorado who rode that day. It represents 2.3% of Glenwood Springs residents were out riding their bicycles that morning, and pretty close to 5% of the local morning travelers going wherever they were going did it by bicycle that day. It was really a lot of fun. And it was fun because it was well organized, and it was well organized thanks very much to generous funding from the city of Glenwood Springs and from meticulous attention to planning details from Sarah Weigel and Brianna Starbuck, with a lot of support from Ryan Gordon. The community center staff really stepped up by having coincidentally a bike repair clinic the night before, and then their staff turned out the morning of the event itself for a festive station right there near the West Midland Path. We had some generous breakfast station hosts in Alpine Bank, Berthan Motors, and SGM, with some extra boost from REI and from KMTS. We even had a couple of celebrities there, one of them we just heard from. So it was a remarkable day, and primarily because the city really stepped up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thanks for coming forward. Anybody else like to speak up?
Somebody online.
Yes, I was going to go there.
Just for your attention.
Yes, thank you. If nobody else in the room, we'll switch to online, and it looks like Tony Hershey, you're up. Please state your name and whether you live in the city or not.
I still live in the city. I was just saying hello. It's nice to see you all. Thank you. Thank you for fixing the sound too.
Okay, excellent.
Bye.
That was it? Okay.
That was all I had. Thank you.
I can handle that, Tony. Thank you very much. Just checking in with IT quick. Can we see the panelists? Is Shelley online for us?
Yeah, she's up in the middle of the top.
Oh, there she is. Excellent. So Shelley has joined the meeting. I just want to let everybody know. Moving on to, well, if nobody else wants to speak or get their 3 minutes, I'll close the next meeting, Lori. Citizens appearing before council, and we'll move on to item 9, Parks and Recreation Month proclamation. So I was charged tonight with reading a proclamation. This is my first proclamation ever, and I am excited that this is the one. And here's why. As some of you may know, the city has been honored to be chosen by the National Recreation and Parks Association, the NRPA, to be in their July magazine, or featured in their July magazine. There was an article in it that depicted what we do at the community center, but not only was there an article, there was also, we're also on the cover shot. And this is the cover photo that is on the July. Look at that smile. This is outstanding. We made this magazine. This is absolutely fantastic. And from what I understand, this is Isaac Alonso, and he's here tonight with his family. And we're going to invite him up in just a second. I also would like to point out Joe Van Wyk, who took the photo. Thank you very much. And Lane Fabianic, who is the therapeutic recreation program coordinator for us here in the city of Glenwood Springs. So congratulations for the national recognition, and please come on up while I transition down. Oh, and last but not least, certainly not least, our fearless Parks and Recreation head honcho, Rod Turallo, is here as well. So please come up as well, if you could. Oh, look at that. That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, can we write this any smaller?
No, we get it on one page.
Okay, yeah, everybody in it? Be nice if Joe was here as well, but I'll start. A proclamation for Parks and Recreation Month, July 2023. whereas Parks and Recreation promote health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks. And whereas Park and Recreation promote time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being. And whereas Park and Recreation encourage physical activity by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, swimming pools, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas Park and Recreation programming and education activities such as out-of-school time programming, youth sports, and environmental education are crucial to childhood development. And whereas Parks and Recreation increase the community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the city of Glenwood Springs recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources by building strong, vibrant, and resilient neighborhoods where no one is excluded and where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. And whereas we celebrate the honor bestowed upon the city Parks and Recreation Department in being selected as the cover photo of the National Recreation and Parks Association, the NPRA, July 2023 magazine, with an included article supporting where community grows and thrives. Now, therefore, I, Marco Dane, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, do hereby proclaim that the month of July 2023 is recognized as Park and Recreation Month in the City of Glenwood Springs. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, to be affixed the 6th day of July in the year 2023. And this proclamation is received by Isaac in honor of Glenwood Springs. Excellent. Thank you so much for coming, all of you.
And now we can.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Thank you.
Now we're gonna bring up a bunch of Parks and Rec people for a quick picture.
Absolutely. Parks and Rec. Come on up, team. Come on, Parks and Rec. I'll step aside. It's all about Parks and Rec. Oh.
You fit us all?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good job, guys. Thank you so much. Oh, thanks for that.
We also take over for you. Here. Eat a cookie.
Yeah, I need a cookie. It is, you're right. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for all your hard work too. Fantastic. All right, we'll let the room clear a little bit. And we'll move on to item 10 on our agenda. Is the consent agenda tonight. And bring it directly to council, entertaining a motion to approve, disapprove, continue, whatever we do. Councilor Godus?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Councilor Godus move to approve. And Councilor Wyman?
I will second that.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And those opposed? We'll see none. We'll move on to actions and or presentations. Item 11 tonight, pay as you throw rollout information, and Brianna's here. Thank you.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Brianna Starbuck. I'm your humble public information officer. Thank you for giving me a little bit of time to give you an update on our pay as you throw citywide trash and recycling program. This is an update for you all and also everyone here and out in the community that we are now beginning enrollment for pay as you throw. This is a big step for us as a community. And so we are just here to give folks those top of mind reminders and let folks know how they are going to be able to enroll over the next month. So enrollment is going to be going until August 4th. And so folks that are in the city limits, that if you currently have a rolling trash cart at your house, then you're gonna need to make sure that you enroll with us. It's for our single family households and our multifamily households that are 7 units or less. Over the course of the next month, you're gonna need to evaluate the level of service that you'd like for your trash service and for your recycling carts, and enroll with us. So selecting both your trash cart and recycling cart size. Couple reminders, your recycling cart is at no additional cost, and the whole concept of the program pay as you throw is the less you waste, the less you spend. So the smaller your trash cart, the smaller your monthly fee will be. Over the course of the next month, we have a number of pop-up events. In fact, we were at our 4th of July celebration talking to our residents about this program. We'll also be at the rec center on the 14th. We'll be down here at the market on 7th, on the 18th, and then we'll be at the Latino conservation ceremony on the 22nd. In addition, we'll have a pop-up sort of permanently here at City Hall. Folks will be able to call or text me directly, and I'm happy to help assist getting folks answering questions and getting them enrolled. You can enroll online, or you can enroll here in person at City Hall. Few other notes is we're really encouraging everyone who is applicable for this program to enroll over the course of the next month, because folks who need to enroll, if you don't enroll over the course of the next month, will be enrolled at that default level, which is the medium recycling can and the medium trash can. But still, please enroll so we make sure that we get you the right carts. We expect that services will begin in November of this year, but are asking folks to enroll now so that we can get all of those program details in place. This and more information is available on our city website right now at cogs.us/PAYT, as in pay as you throw. So check that out. I also wanted to just let City Council know that we're having quite a robust outreach and communication program as part of this. This is the major initiative that the city is taking on. So we'll have a big launch starting next week with news releases, emails. We'll have utility bill inserts and mailers and digital ads on social media and in the paper, radio ads. So you're going to be seeing a lot of me and a lot about pay as you throw over the course of the next month. And just would encourage anyone out there in the community, please reach out if you have questions, and we're happy to help get you set up where you need to be with this service. And that is generally the update. We're enrolling. It's exciting. Get on board. Woohoo.
Thank you, Brianna. While you hear any questions quick from council? Okay, Councilor Weimer, please.
Brianna, thank you. Any update on the utility bill conversion, like how things are going versus our expectations? Thank you.
I don't have an uptake rate of about how many folks that we are enrolling, but I do know that our utility billing and finance desk has been exceptionally busy in assisting individuals in enrolling in that program and answering questions. And so we are getting on it, and it's very busy. We are seeing quite a few people take us up on enrollment of that program, but would certainly continue encouraging folks that if you haven't done that yet, there's still time to get enrolled in that system. There were some, learning moments for us all in this rollout. And so if you haven't had a chance to connect with us and you have questions, we're also completely happy to help get folks enrolled in that system as well.
And as I understand, the pay as you throw is going to be part of that utility system as well, right? Everything will be in one place.
That's correct. And so later this year, they will, I believe that it will be it will appear as a line on the water bills.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I just wanted to let you know that we did get some feedback about the ease of enrolling for that. And staff has created a video where they walk through. And so that's going to get posted fairly soon so that it'll actually walk people through it.
Great. Excellent. Thank you.
The attorney needed the help of the finance director. Just saying. I needed a little help myself.
I got it. First try, but hey, no big deal. Thank you, Brianna. Moving on, item 12, ordinance 2023-10 code amendments to title 070, including section 070-040-080, 070-040-090, related to site and building design, second reading. And that is Community Development Director Klausman.
Mayor Pro Tem. I
Hi,
had a
Shelley.
question. Hi, you forgot about me. I had a
I
question.
totally did. I
for
was
Brianna.
looking. I was looking and then there was no hand and now there's a hand. Please, Councilor Cow.
Oh, I just had a quick question on the rollout of the pay as you throw, the marketing. In the list of goals that are in our packet, I didn't see a goal listed on the extending the life of the landfill. And I think that's really important to a lot of our citizens. So if we could just make sure that that's kind of front and center as one of our main goals for the program, that would be great.
Absolutely. Happy to add that. And absolutely, diverting our items that are recyclable from our landfill is a huge part of this. It is listed on this particular piece that has already sort of gone out the door, but happy to add that as part of our
Awesome.
lease and all the other things.
Okay, just checking. Thanks, Brianna.
All right, thank you. And back to item 12 that I just read 2 minutes ago. Hannah, please.
Good evening, Hannah Klausman, Community and Economic Development Director. So this is a second reading for code amendments to Title 70 that we discussed at your last regular meeting. It has a few variety changes to code that staff has identified that need some tweaking, as well as a change in the variety of housing types requirement. And since our last meeting in your Exhibit A that goes along with the ordinance, I did include those changes you made last time, which were lowering the thresholds for the unit counts down to 20, 40, and 80 from the previous 40, 80, and 120, and then also including a higher percentage within those categories to meet the requirements. So since this is a second reading, I'll open it up for questions, and we do have a member of the public that has comments if you do want to open it up for that as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
excellent. I sure will. Thank you, Hannah. And we'll start, bring it back to council, I guess, and start with Councilor Godis, please.
Yeah, Hannah, where do we find these numbers or these standards? Whether communities have 70%, where did this come from?
So specifically, you're talking about the category options that include.
Yeah.
So 70% of the total units being deed restricted.
70% of that, 100% resident occupied, and originally the staff recommendation was 10% for 3 bedrooms. Where did we find that?
So some of this has to do, it's coming from staff with our interactions with other communities and also what we're seeing. So I'm going to speak to the specifically 70% of the total number of units deed restricted to an average of 100% area median income. We're really looking at how our other programs work and what we require there, which as the inclusionary zoning side is 20%. So it is staff exercise in kind of choosing those numbers and then passing it by you for review. The 25% and the 10% of each category, 10% was where staff was comfortable starting with as a discussion point and thought that would at least move the needle from what is currently happening when developments choose from this category option. So we started with 10 and then council discussion moved it up to 25%.
But we don't have examples of other communities that have this high of inclusionary zoning that actually have work, that actually produce, do we?
I'm thinking that's a
Okay.
big question.
Yeah, and I was gonna say,
keeping in mind that this is not just inclusionary zoning. This is different types of and mix of unit types, both physical structures as well as other ways to meet that. So it's entirely possible that you could have just the 20% inclusionary zoning, but 2 different housing types or 3 different housing form types.
Until you
and
get
meet
above
the-
like 40 units or whatever that. those
Right, like
structures are.
the 20, I think council said it at 20 to 40, you need 2 different types. So that would mean you could have multifamily and single family, or multifamily and an apartment building to meet those 2 types. Or you could do, say, 100% RO. There's a whole laundry list there. So it's not just inclusionary zoning.
But if you have 40 units as it is now, since we lowered it, 40 would require 3 different varieties. So that would require all of them.
There's actually 9 options to choose from. So
Okay.
as Carl did mention, this is a combination of our, and I'm sorry, Jonathan, you were,
I was not here. Yes.
sorry.
I watched the video. So
A
my
combination of our current code, which focused more on architectural type with this idea of combining it with some affordability, which is also opening up choices for people that we felt met the intent of this section. So there are quite a few options there. And, you know, as you mentioned, projects with 80 or more would be required to choose 4 of those. So with the 4 options, you're likely going to need to select one of the affordability mechanisms, if not 2. We've incorporated in our inclusionary zoning, so any units that are meeting the inclusionary zoning requirements also meet this, so you don't have to double up, obviously. That would be problematic. But this is a creative way of getting at a problem that most communities are facing and struggling with, how to provide these types of variety of housing options as well.
And thank you. And do we mean 80 or 800 units? Because in the staff report, we have 800 units.
Is there an extra 0?
I think so. And I pointed that out to our reporter who said 800 units. I think she took that from the staff report. So I want to apologize to Cass because it appears she took it directly from our staff report. So
I will take the heat for that. That's Hannah working at 10 p.m.
that's okay. So we might want to amend that.
And is that, sorry, just so that I know, is that in the exhibit
It's in staff report
staff report? Okay.
on page 1, third to the last paragraph.
We will make that correction, and thank you for the clarification. It is 80, not 800.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, would you mind, since I asked to pull this, would you mind if I made a few comments, or would you like to hear from the public first?
Let's finish questions.
Okay.
Then let's do public comment, then I'll bring it back
Okay.
for our comments. So let's do that. Thank you for asking.
Sure.
Thank you, Hannah. Anybody else have a question? Let's see, we have Councillor Schachter, please.
Thank you. What about the fees in lieu? There's no amount set in the ordinance. How will those ultimately be determined and create the atmosphere that we choose?
Sure. So we wanted to include a fee in lieu. That's not a new concept for inclusionary zoning or a lot of different aspects of our code. The exact amount is going to actually be decided by you through resolution. So that would come later if this passes. So it's not a number that we've landed on right now, and we'll take some thoughtful consideration.
And is it possible, based on discussion and intent, even though it says those funds will go into a designated housing type fund, is it possible to say we don't want fees in lieu? Should we decide?
Absolutely. I mean, if you chose not to have a way to sort of buy out a part of this, you could absolutely do that as council. I think staff, when we talked about it, and a little bit to Jonathan's point, I think about, the rate at which it applies, we thought allowing an opportunity to buy out for the actual cost of us trying to replace that housing or make a difference on that housing, I think it would be something meaningful. 20% of a free market value, $100,000. The number needs to be something more than, $10,000 per unit. It has to be meaningful, I think. Or I would suggest probably not having it at all.
Thank you.
And I would just add to that, there's a lot of information out there on fee in lieu. There's a lot of communities that have threaded the needle on what that amount is. So we would have a lot to refer to in deciding on that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Counselor Schachter, you done? Excellent. Anybody else? Hang on just a second. Nobody here? Then we'll go to Counselor Cow, please.
All right, thank you. Hannah, just a couple of quick questions on the page 2 of 32 of the actual code changes. Does that page make sense to you?
I'm going to it right now. Go ahead.
Okay. It looks like there's the Meadows development is exempt. I'm just wondering why that is.
So page 2. Usually when we have an exemption for the Meadows development or similar developments, that's because annexation agreements supersede design standards in our own code. So they have their own Glenwood Meadows planning and design code that we administer for that property.
Okay, so I guess that's a question for Carl.
Yeah, I was
Our
gonna
attorney, do we have to exempt the Meadows?
I think that you would, to the extent that it applies to the last increment of housing that was approved under the annexation and development agreement. That I believe it's 140 some odd units that are left. I think everything beyond that, you could, as a matter of general applicability, apply this to.
Okay, so could we alter? Just wonder if we can alter that to clarify that point.
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my computer to load the right page.
So as it reads now, this is under exceptions. This section shall not apply to the following. And it's item E, properties subject to the Glenwood Meadows annexation and development agreement. So that is exempting them from the rest of this section, which would include the housing variety section. So perhaps, Carl, we could add except for subsection, and I will come up with that number. One second.
I think that would be fine.
Yeah, just a question on that. And then my next question was under multifamily, and that's on page 7 of 32.
Okay. Thank you so much for the page numbers, Commissioner Cow. That is very helpful.
And we can get there because it was pretty good size packet. So here in this section under A7, and also, let's see, it looks like we did not go with we've got the 25%, but actually it was here on item 7, but also on under the regular, not the multifamily housing, but the regular housing. It was, I thought that our motion last time, the amendment to the motion had that 10% changed to 25% of total dwelling units for each bedroom type.
We did change that above, and it reads, each type must represent a minimum of 25% of the total dwelling units provided unless otherwise indicated in the category below. So that was changed to 25%. I didn't change it below. So if that is an issue, because the item you're referring to, number 7, inclusion of 3 different bedroom count configurations, each bedroom type shall be a minimum of 10% of the total dwelling units. So Counselor,
Right.
you are saying that you thought that second 10%, so each different bedroom count configuration should also represent 25%?
Yes, and I believe that was, I went back and watched the meeting video from last time, and that was the amendment to the motion that we made at the last meeting.
I believe
So
you
both
are
of those,
correct.
yeah, that,
I do recall that as well, and I think I just failed to change that one number. So thank you for catching that.
okay. And then I also had questions about the other code change, under other code changes where you go with the 50% lot coverage change. Just a general, not really understanding that and what the impacts would be, but we can talk about that when we get to discussion of this.
You know, in reviewing this, I think with the numbers, I think this needs just a moment Because if we have it that each category from the list, if you have to choose, say 4, each category has to represent 25%. I want to make sure that if we require each of the bedroom counts to represent 25%, that we're not over percentaging the project. So I'll try
Right,
and
that
think
makes
about that
sense.
as we continue.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Questions? Councilor Godus, please.
Yeah, another one came up, Hannah. We heard that we had 9 options to satisfy the standards. And if I'm looking on page 7, 3, variety of housing types, A, is this where I should be looking?
Yes.
So it looks like a lot of those are crossed out. Like the first 5 are crossed out. So it looks like we only have 4. And
Just the letters should be crossed out.
okay, so that's
It's just renumbering. It's a formatting. So
okay.
we had it previously as letters and it changed to numbers. So there used to be 5 and now there are 9. So we added 3 categories.
So this, if I recall, and maybe this is just my recollection of what I thought, we wanted to try to get away from having like Bell Rippey. 100 units, it's a multifamily development. It needs to be, it's near BRT station. It's where high density probably should go. And they had to plop a single family house down in order to like check a box. And so this is a way to have different boxes for people to check. But if, and maybe I'll have some comments about this, if those boxes are too difficult to achieve, we're kind of back to a developer going, well, I guess I'll plop a single family house here to check one of those boxes. How would, if somebody wanted to do an 80 unit development, but couldn't figure out how to make it pencil at 70%, couldn't figure out a way to enforce and wasn't willing to enforce a resident occupancy because they just couldn't figure out how possibly to do that. And I have another question on who's going to do that, probably, whether that's going to be the city or that's going to be self-reporting. And if they just can't figure out a way to do the 25%, I believe, for a 3-bedroom count, they now through this have to do 4 of the remaining options, correct?
I believe they would be left with 6 options.
Okay.
And I understand what you're saying, and there are implications for this. You know, developers are going to look at this and it's some different and new requirements. And certainly this came about, as you mentioned, the code wasn't quite meeting the intent, and we had a project that put that in perfect clarity. But in looking at this, you know, with the 100% resident occupancy, and I do believe that this would probably fall under the resident occupancy as we're applying it with our inclusionary zoning program. You know, that's not, it is a deed restriction, but that's not an affordability aspect for the developer. It's stating these units are going to be for people who work in these geographic areas that we have a lot of. You guys have a lot of experience administering in our code. So that's not a price cap. That's not setting a sales price. That's not setting rent. That's not a financial burden. You are correct. A little bit of reporting there. There are aspects of that are going to be.
And are we,
some,
sorry to
but
interrupt,
it's not on the financial.
are we going to be enforcing that resident occupancy, or how does that get enforced? And how often and by whom?
I mean, it would be the same way that you guys restricted BLD. I mean, we have those kinds of restrictions all over the place. So
I
we
guess
have a housing
currently,
manager.
who does that now?
Currently, we contract with Garfield County Housing Authority for our inclusionary and our voluntary programs, which have very similar geographic resident occupancy restrictions.
Okay. And do we feel like we get pretty good compliance on that?
Yes.
Okay.
We do. There is a component of the inclusionary zoning, as I've mentioned before. Most of these units are just coming online now. So this is still a new program. But Garfield County Housing Authority administers these programs for a lot more than us and are very good at their job.
Okay.
It's not me. I'm not the enforcer.
Not yet.
I'd love for you to be the enforcer. You'd scare the heck
I
out of
used
me.
to be. I've now passed the torch.
That's all I have. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And we'll move on to Counselor Weimer, please.
Hannah, just as a reminder, if a 40-unit plan comes before the town, before the city, who is the deciding authority?
That would be you here.
It would
So
come to
anything
council.
over 24 units, so starting at 25 and above. Planning and Zoning Commission is a recommending body, and then the final approving authority lies with you.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions to staff? No, we'll see none. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah, for now. Anybody from the public like to come forward, speak to this item?
I have a couple comments.
I'm sure you do. Please state your name and whether you live in the city or not.
Working tired.
Must be nice.
Yeah,
Exactly.
not really. I was planning to go get a workout in, and then I was like, oh man, I gotta go to a council meeting. Clark Anderson, 1502 Midland Avenue.
Thank you.
Good to see you guys. So, first of all, I'm just glad to see the progress and work that's happening on this front. It's very cool. And just wanted to make a couple comments. It seems like there's been a lot of work that's gone into this. And I think for the most part, it's good. One thing I want to start out with is just noting that the resident occupancy idea is an important one. Maybe I'm going to come back to that because I want to kind of check mark through a couple other things that have come up and that I think are worth just noting. The broad intent of this and the idea of having more diversity in housing types is something that you guys have been, as a city, even before many of you were here, have been looking at for a long time. And, Jonathan, your point in terms of some of the types of projects that we've seen in the past where we wish there was greater diversity in the way that it was designed. I think there's some level where we're trying to circumvent that and give ourselves a better chance to get something that works better. There are also times when like real unfettered density is what you want. We might want to make sure that there aren't places where that really makes sense. We don't really yet sort of operate with a sort of transit oriented development mindset, but down the road, that will probably be something that will be more part of our future as transportation, housing, and land use intersection continues to be part of how Glenwood grows and changes. So that might just be something for down the road to look at. But in general, the idea is good. And one of the things when it comes to diversity, though, is to recognize like we kind of go from single family here to sort of this mid-range type of units to then like high density multifamily. And there's actually a lot of diversity inside that missing middle range that might be nice to call out. I think it might actually help some of the questions that you're asking about, Jonathan, just in terms of providing some more choices to meet this, just generally in terms of like what I think the intent is, just to get better form in terms of the projects that we're getting, better design. I don't think that needs to be a massive overhaul. I think you're really close, and maybe it's not even a change that needs to happen. Relatedly, I think, Hannah and I were talking a little bit about this earlier. We've got a lot of single family residential in this community. I understand why it's in there as a choice for meeting this. It doesn't feel like it's in line with the intent, which is to provide greater diversity in choices. And so I think that's just something that's worth considering, or at a minimum, making sure that I don't know. It's just that there's something there that begs some consideration.
2 seconds.
Really?
Yep.
Now 0 seconds. Can I come back up later? Because I want to talk about the resident occupancy part, but we can do that later.
Yes, we can do that later. Thank you, Clark. Yeah. What would you like?
What I'd like to do is I think Clark has worked.
Speaker.
You have to recognize me, sorry.
No. Okay. Talk.
I was gonna say, I think Clark's worked incredibly hard on a lot of city stuff as it relates to this. He has a lot of experience, and I, for one, would love to allow him as a subject expert and a community expert, maybe a couple more minutes of public comment, if it pleases the rest of council. If not, and we want to be strict on it, that's fine. want to upset the apple cart.
I think we're opening up a can of worms. As
Okay.
much as I respect Clark, I don't think we should do that leeway here.
That's fine.
It's just regular public comment, so I think, I mean, I totally appreciate your comment, and yes, he's absolutely correct, but I think just for sake of procedure, I think, thank you, Clark, and thank you as well.
If there's a point at which the topic changes to, and it's the public responding to a question, is that allowable?
No. Sorry, no back and forth. Thank you, though.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Anybody else from the public like to come forward? See none, I'll close the public portion. I'll bring it back to council. Entertaining a motion in item 2023-10. Oh. Councillor Godus, please.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, and I think part of this stems, some of my questions and comments probably stem from not being here last meeting. So thanks for, bearing with me for the questions and, not being in the room. Sometimes you lose a little bit just watching it on YouTube later. I think the 9 options that we have, I think are really restrictive for somebody that wants to do a development. I'm thinking, if we had hypothetically a BLD type of project and they had to comply with the 20% inclusionary zoning we currently have. They didn't, but if we did, we'd have 60 affordable housing units right now. So when I look over the different varieties, and again, I'll use BLD as an example, not, as the end all and be all, but that's incredibly challenging. If you've seen the soil work, a place to build between the soils and the earth moving and the location. I don't know anything about large scale developments, but I don't know that pencils out at anything more than 20%. But even if we did a 30%, you could have the free market give us potentially, if they chose that out of the ones, and they probably can't do the single family, they can't do the 2-family dwellings, they probably can't do detached single family dwellings just because of the scope of where they're at. Like BLD, like Bell Rippey, like a lot of these projects as we're building up higher on hills with worse soils. So they're going to be stuck. I know there's 9 potential, but there's really only 4 or 5 options that a lot of folks have. And I think that's restrictive and that's fine, but I hesitate to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because when we have potential to get almost 100, again, in theory, this is a hypothetical, 100 affordable housing units on the back of a developer, or the developer says, no, I'm not going to do any units because I just can't check these boxes. I think that's problematic. So I think that 70% is much too high. I would like to see a more gradual, the 70% AMI for 100%. 70% of the units have to be 100% AMI.
Can I throw a quick question?
Of course.
The 30%, you mentioned, so instead of 20% of diversity, you think 30%?
Well, instead of 70%, excuse me, instead of 70% of the units having to be 100% AMI as one of the options, right? I see what
you're saying. I got it.
I'm suggesting a more incremental and measured approach, because I think only Aspen, I don't know if any other community, but I think Aspen's at 30% inclusionary zoning. So for us to give an option, I mean, at that point, what we're really saying is you might as well make it all 100% affordable, because then at that point, there's a lot of federal grants. There's a lot of money out there for large scale projects, but 70% is just, that's all off the back of the developer. And I'm all about screwing the developer. Don't get me wrong. Please don't misunderstand me. But I think that we lose the opportunity to extract from that developer dozens and dozens of affordable housing units that we'll never get with the meager 2C money that we have, with the hypothetical 123 state money that we hope to get. I think that, I would propose a more measured 30, maybe 35%, although I don't know how a lot of developers will make it at 35%. So I don't think we'll ever see that box ever checked at 70%. So I think it's pretty worthless to offer that as an option. So I would suggest we just take it off as an option and have them do one of the 8 remaining options. I know there's a desire to slow down these large developments. I think as a community, people are anxious about seeing these large developments come and what it means, or what they feel, or what that means. But if we want to just kill them, You know, and I view a lot of this as maybe not the intent, but I think the outcome, the unintended consequences, this is going to just kill most developments over now 40 units. I think 20 units, you could probably figure out how to check a couple boxes. But this is a moratorium, in my opinion. I think, and maybe that's an opinion not shared by everybody on council, but if we want to have a moratorium on any development over 40 units, let's just call it a moratorium. Now I know we can't do that because then it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Order. We were calling for a motion, not discussion. We could discuss after the motion. Am I not mistaken? You called for a motion?
I did bring it back for a motion, but
I thought it was motion or discussion.
no, usually motion.
Okay,
and
I'll
then
make a motion
discussion.
that we continue this item to the next meeting.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to continue. Any second? I'll see none. Motion fails due to lack of second.
Okay, I'll make another motion. I'll make a motion that we reduce the 70% down to 30%. And that we reduce the 25% of 3-bedroom units back down to the staff suggested 10%. For the sake of discussion.
The sake of discussion, okay. Is the motion clear? We have a motion, Councillor Godes made with a few changes. Everybody clear on that? Looks like it. Councillor Schachter?
No, I was gonna make a motion.
Oh, I see. Okay, can I get a second on this motion? Again, not getting a second. Motion fails
I do
due
have
to
a
lack
point
of second.
discussion that might be helpful or might not.
No, we just want a motion right now, apparently.
No. Actually, I would agree at this point that I think we need to discuss this and figure out what the details are before we enter a motion, because I do believe that there is some points here.
Can I just finish my comments then, and then I'll be done until.
Can we run the timer 3 minutes?
Yeah, we can do that. Well, I didn't get a chance to speak on it at first
just
reading at all.
kidding.
No,
Just
that's
do your
fine.
thing.
I'm wrapping up here. I think the other thing is 3 bedrooms. You mentioned moving the 3 bedrooms at that last meeting from 10% to 25%. In my experience, I've owned 3-bedroom units. I currently own and manage other 3-bedroom units, specific the ones in Glenwood Springs and other places. It typically is adults that occupy 3-bedroom units. It's not families in multifamilies. There's not, I mean, do you know of families that are, a lot of families that are in multifamily units? And there's some that have 3 units. In my experience, they are, 1 bedroom is a couple, another bedroom is a single person, another bedroom is a single person. There's 4 adults. And we do parking per unit count, not per bedroom. So what I find is that there's 4 adults with 4 cars in a 3-bedroom unit. So I don't think that gets to what we're trying to do. I think that actually exasperates the problem, because what we hear about these projects is there's not enough parking. It feels like there's too much traffic. And, you know, the problem with 3-bedroom units is those are $3,000 units, $2,600 for 2-bedroom units right now. So we're talking 3,000 or more. And if a family wants a 3 bedrooms, they can find a 3-bedroom house or townhome for $3,000 somewhere else. So I don't think that 25% is helpful. I would like to see that back down to 10%. Those are my comment. Oh, the last comment I have is, can we make, you lowered it down, your motion, I think, to lower it down to 20, 40, and 60. I believe that was your suggestion.
That was me. Yeah.
Can we make at least that bottom level consistent with council review? And council review is 24 units. So can we at least bump that up to 24? 25, excuse me, because I'd like to see if a 25 unit or a 20 unit came to us. So either lower that threshold for council review or raise that bottom level up enough so that we can see and have a developer say, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's what I'd like to do.
Crossed my mind.
But I can't do that. So those are my comments. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you. You just got that chance because you weren't here last time. So thank you. This is not going to be the new normal, just so you know. And I think it's Councillor Schachter, please.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate Commissioner Godes' perspective, even when I sometimes don't agree. There's been a lot of thought and work gone into this, and I'm more inclined to pass the motion as it is. And if we have to deal with it later, deal with it later. This is pretty radical for us, and I do believe there's very little opportunity in Glenwood right now for 80 or more units. And I hear the community saying, we don't want 80 or more units. And if this is a case where a developer comes with, hey, I've got 80 units and it's not something we want, I just soon put barriers in front of them, as many as I can initially. And we can always amend these later. So as a first blush, kind of with Hannah and staff and our input, trying to meet our goals, I think this is a pretty good first run at it. And if we find that nobody can develop in here, maybe that's partly what we want. On the flip side is if we find something that extremely high quality can meet these criteria, and 3 or 4 of them should be able to be met. So I'd proceed pretty much as is without many, if any, amendments for those reasons. Thank you.
And that's your motion.
Huh?
That's your motion.
Wait, I thought we were doing discussion and not motions.
Oh,
If you
okay.
want a motion, I'll make a motion.
Right.
I'm a little confused about the sequence.
So am I. I'm actually looking for a motion at this
All right.
point, and then we'll discuss the rest. He just got extra time because he wasn't here, so.
Well, I would make a motion then if I can get the right number of this thing. Regarding ordinance number
Right.
10, 2023. Is that the right one? Yes, amending Title 70. I move that we accept the ordinance as proposed and recommendations of staff.
Okay, excellent. So now we have a motion on the table for approval of ordinance 2023-10. Can I get a second? Councillor Cow?
Excuse me, sorry. I cannot second the motion as it currently stands. I would second the motion with a couple of amendments.
So let's do this. Motion fails due to lack of second. Let's start this again. Entertaining a motion and item
I can make a motion.
Don't you amend
Counselor-
the motion later.
Cow, please.
Isn't that?
Okay. I would make a motion that we approve ordinance 2023-10 with the amendments to title 070 as indicated with the following changes, obviously correcting that 800 to the 80 units. I do accept the suggestion by Councillor Godis that we take that 70% at 100% AMI and take it down to 35%, because I think that's still significantly more than our inclusionary housing. And also the revision that all future development at Meadows is not exempted, only what we may be required to exempt based on the current agreements that are out there. And then I would also request that we do not accept the lot coverage change that's suggested for the code change right now, but that we put that off for a future discussion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cow. Everybody clear on the motion? Looks like it. Do we have a second? Councillor Godis?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Okay, now, any discussion? Since you're already green, go.
I would just ask for a friendly amendment to consider that 3-bedroom based on the comments I said. I don't think that gets to what we want to see with families when we're talking about multifamily developments of 24 or more units. So Councillor Kopp, would you consider
20 or
that?
more. It's
Huh?
20 or more. 20 or more is
Yes.
based on the code motion. Are you suggesting that just the 3-bedroom goes to 10%?
Yeah, that was original staff recommendations. Then it was brought up to 25% at the last meeting.
Okay.
Is that okay, I'm thinking, or okay, you would
Yeah.
accept that as?
Okay, I'll accept that.
Okay, and then thank you, and I'll amend my second. And then also, Councillor Kopp, would you amend your motion to align the 24 the 20 units to what our development review is, which would be 24. Would you mind moving that, or 25, excuse me?
Hang on a second. May I interject a question here to community development? What is easier? Should we change this up to the 24 or should we take the 24 down to 20? What would make more sense?
Since I understand the question. So the question is the breakpoints on, we have administrative review, planning commission review, and then council review.
Right.
Council underneath the full development code reviews anything of over 25 units. I would suggest the easier thing to do if you want that to align with this section of the code is to set it at 25, not 20.
This that we're doing tonight. Okay.
Because then we don't have to change all.
That's the easier fit. That's what I meant.
That's the only answer. That's excellent.
Is that acceptable to you, Councilor Cobb?
Yes, I'll accept that amendment.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and an amended motion and an amended second. Now discussion, and we'll start with Councillor Schachter, please.
Might be partly question, partly of Hannah and Shelley brought it up. The setbacks that you referred to, will that affect the implementation of this? And also related to this, either now or in the future, do those setback or the yard coverage requirements run counter to our goals of increased density, ADUs, and additional development?
Thank you for opening up this particular item because I do have some discussion points here and I want to clarify why staff included this. And the change that we made, this is a very problematic section of code that we've run into some very tricky situations as staff. And so this was really clarifying the intent of maximum lot coverage. If you read how it is now, it does not include anything that references vacant lots. And so a vacant lot was held to a more strict standard than an existing home lot coverage. So what we found, because sometimes we are, hamstruck by our code in reading it and we can't find the flexibility. Vacant lots weren't mentioned here. So by default, they were only allowed the very minimum, while everyone else that already had homes existing on their lots was allowed to go to 50% coverage of the lot. Vacant lots were only allowed to develop to 25.
Oh.
It didn't make sense.
No.
And so I would highly advocate for allowing this change to continue. And we can certainly talk to lot coverage, Commissioner Schachter, that's a very salient point that I haven't thought all the way through. And if we need to take a look at tweaking this, this only applies to infill development. So when you are bordered by 2 single-family homes. So it's really meant to incorporate a friendly scale so that 2 single-family homes aren't suddenly bombarded by something that's edge to edge and 40 feet high. That's what this is getting at. I don't believe that it impacts what you're talking about, but I'm happy to take another look at it and come back with you with more court changes because I do that every month.
So if I understand this correctly, and a possible amendment to the motion, if Shelley's
right
willing, this change is just applying to vacant lots. So their setbacks are now, or their lot coverage is now consistent with the rest of developed lots.
Yes.
And in terms of the question of, is our lot coverage consistent with our goals, would be a discussion for a different discussion with you and P&Z.
Yes, and I think we can incorporate that to discussions and possible policy recommendations that are coming down the line with the strategic housing plan update, because we are looking at such things as density, lot square footage, and those items. So I will take a personal look at this to make sure that it is in line with whatever is coming with those changes.
That helps. And if Councillor Kaup is willing, I'd consider an amendment if we can to put that back in the mix with that understanding.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Schachter. And sorry, Councillor Weimer, I'm going to jump to Councillor Kaup since this is kind of a pressing question. Councillor Kaup, please.
Sure. Quickly, yes, I'll accept that amendment in the context of this discussion. Those are exactly the same questions that I had about it. I'm concerned that we're limiting our goal of density and the need for housing in line with the strategic housing plan. So if we can make sure that's part of that future discussion, I'll amend my motion.
Thank you. And Counselor Godus,
I will amend my second.
excellent. Amended motion, amended second. Any more discussion? We'll go to Counselor Weimer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
You're welcome.
So I didn't support this in our last meeting, and I don't think I support it yet. And I'm usually the kind of guy in this environment or others that I want to be more solution oriented versus problem oriented. But and I don't have a solution immediately in front of me, so I apologize for that. But where I'm at, I think with all of this is, so I love the idea of bringing 25 or more units in front of council, because I think that in itself would accomplish nearly everything that we want to achieve with this very, what I think of as onerous legislation, right? That there are times when we want density. There are times when we want variety. There are times when we are looking for verticality. There are times when we're not, right? And so these sort of different varieties and different sort of options are often very site specific and very contextual, right? In where the thing is going. And so I wonder if we couldn't achieve our goals of diversity, of inclusionary housing, of visual interest, et cetera, through the through simple site approval process, right? Especially if it's now coming in front of council, that we can say, you know what, we want to see more X or less Y as that particular project is coming in front of us. And so that we then have the ability to flex and work with developers and jointly come to a solution that everyone is happy with, versus putting up those fences up front that some could see as a moratorium, or others could see as, you know what, that is far too difficult for me to understand, or pencil it to make it work. I'm gonna go somewhere else. And I think that we are, the spirit is right. And I align with the spirit. I think we're over engineering things with this. And I wonder aloud, and I would like people to maybe help me through it. Could we instead, with some upfront guidance from Ms. Klausman and her team in pre-meetings and that sort of thing with developers, help them understand what sort of things it is we're trying to accomplish? We have strategic housing, we have other sort of documents out there that should provide some shape to potential developers. And then as those developers bring their larger projects to council, we continue to shape. It's not a no, it's not a yes. It's not a 4-year project for them to get that far because they have to check or not check, or, you know, pull levers or mix and match. But instead it's just some upfront guidance. And then it's a council involved site approval process where we can make sure that it's meeting our strategic needs with sort of like project by project.
If I can.
Please, I'm done.
Thank you. Unfortunately, no. And here's why, is because in the absence of the guideline in the code, you don't have the authority to do that. And I will tell you, having, I don't know, entitled $500 million worth of housing in my career as a private developer, if you don't have rules that I have to follow, and it's a question of whether or not the politics of council determine the outcome with no rules, one of two things is going to happen. Either I'm not going to work with you because I don't know what the outcome is going to be, because I don't have clear guidance on what you want on a specific project, or two, I'm going to ram something down your throat based on use by right. And you don't have any defensible ability to say no. And so really where we fall to is with things like this, providing that shape and guidance in the code, Otherwise, you as council don't have the authority to tell a developer, no, you can't do that. It would revert almost entirely to underlying zoning without design standards. And so if you were to make a decision because this doesn't meet my strategic goals, but that's not a codified design standard or a codified limitation within the code, I would win on a 106 action that you made an arbitrary and capricious decision regarding my project because the underlying zoning and the law as it applied to me was different than what you decided on the dais you wanted that day. And so that's unfortunately why things like this, we have to set those parameters in the code to work inside of. As much as that flexibility would be nice, and it really is a great process if it would work that way, I can tell you that 99% of the time it never would. And I can tell you as a developer's attorney, I find that as terrifying as I would find this, because I would never know what the outcome was when I came in front of you. Right. And so that I know it's a collaborative process. It feels like in the private sector would work really well. It is very hard to implement here. And you can talk to two guys who spent a long time on the planning commission in Councilor Shackner and Dem about kind of how that works in the real world in terms of when you don't have any guardrails to what they're setting in front of you.
So with our comprehensive plan update,
That's not code.
our strategic housing
code.
plan, our inclusionary zoning policies,
Unless they're adopted in the code, they're not enforceable. None of those documents, they are planning documents and provide us guidance. The code provides us authority.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Zelinski, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna go all the way back to kind of why I think Hannah started this process is we were not seeing the development that our community wanted, needed, deserved. And so I think that the stricter standards, the, different requirements send a clear message that we're guiding the development. We don't just want a developer to come in and dictate and then, check an arbitrary box. And so, that doesn't necessarily make us look not receptive to development. That just makes us look like we have standards and, we've actually reached a point where we have to be very strategic and thoughtful now about what goes in because we have had so much recently. And so the community has really asked us to slow it down, be more thoughtful, to go to the different bedroom counts. I know that's like a big thing, like these giant apartment buildings with minimal bedrooms, it's an issue. And yeah, the parking is an issue. We've made a lot of exceptions over time. So all of that has to be considered. And I think that the multiple options, although they seem fairly restrictive because they're not that well differentiated, they're in there for a reason. And I think that we have to go back to the intent of this, which is to start to slow rampant development and make it thoughtful development. And that's really what the community has requested of us loud and clear, and staff is following that directive.
Thank you. Counselor Godus.
I have no comments, but I do have a question because I think it would be great. Counselor Weimer, can I call you Mitchell? And I thought, no, I'll be formal. I agree with you. I agree with everything. I mean, not about the other stuff you said that Carl shot you down with. I don't agree with that stuff, but
I know, I'm sorry.
yeah, kind of a jerk about it too.
Grants?
That's not code.
That's very nice, by the way.
But I do want to ask a legitimate question is, I don't know if this motion will pass, but there might be support to do something. And is there something that you feel is there an amendment you feel you could make that would get you to a reluctant yes? I'm at a reluctant yes, and I second the motion. And if I thought it could go down, I would vote no against my own second. But in order to be productive, is there something that you, a little carrot in there that you would like to see that could maybe get you to a reluctant yes?
Put you in the spot, but you can think about it for a minute.
Because Sumner's got his mic on too, if you want to think about that.
Thank you for that opportunity.
Counselor Schachter.
Well, I don't get paid to say this, but I was about to echo what our counselor said, based on our years on P and Z. And if it's not in the code and somebody comes without variances and we don't like it and it's right by use, we found ourselves, Mitchell, behind the 8 ball too many times. And the goal is maybe we overreach a bit, but that's better than not in this case with the mood of the community and the limited development we have. And part of your concern ideally would be great, but maybe some of it could be mitigated with legal permission to enhance, to the extent we legally can, more extensive pre-application conferencing with developers to see if we can align their needs with our code. But if we don't have the code, we're not going to get what we want. I appreciate what your concern is.
Thank you.
I would say on that point, just to give you a little bit more time to think, maybe, Counselor. What's that?
He's ready.
Okay, anyway, no, what I was gonna say is that we, Hannah, her team, my team, while there is a single required pre-application, I will tell you, really great developers spend a lot of time with our respective groups. We spend a ton of time working on projects. And one of the things that I think over the years, Glenwood has always, I think, and you will hear this oftentimes at the dais from the best developers that come in here and propose projects, is how collaborative the staff is in trying to find the best solutions and find paths forward and ways to make things work. I think that's a strength of the planning staff in particular. So while it's required that you do one pre-app, if you're really going to get something great done, you're going to spend a lot of time with staff, even though it's not required.
Mayor Pro Tem, could we get our attorney to give us an interpretation of the amended motion?
As soon as Counselor Weimer has given us his answer,
Oh, that's right.
or given his answer to Counselor Godus, we'll be all right.
I'll talk, Mr. Counselor, to give you some time to formulate your answer.
Nice.
I'm not that good.
And if I could have like 10 seconds after Counselor Weimer, just from my perspective of the discussions that occurred at CML.
Sure.
Because I went to 3 different sessions on housing, so.
All right, Counselor Weimer.
So Counselor Godus, thank you for the opportunity. And I was looking at that list and I trying to understand, what is it that I disagree about? What is it that I disagree with, right? Looking, it's not the language, it's not the items, it's not the list, it's the philosophy of us having or feeling like we have to dictate to this level of excruciating detail, to the point where we need to be darn sure that the combinations and the perturbations of those items are workable, and that we're not, unintended consequences, causing a situation where, I just want to make sure that so I don't like the philosophy, and I think that's where I have a problem with this. And then I would just advise ourselves, and I've got every confidence in Hannah and the team, that thinking through what the list is and how those things work together in conjunction with the other policies that we've already established, there are options to make this work in ways that align with the intent of the legislation. And I think that's where I'm at.
Well said.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a second, if there's no other discussion right now, I have a quick clarification question. And you probably said it, I just didn't hear it. 9 options in the list. The motion is here to reduce to 70% of deed restricted units to 35.
In number 9.
In number 9, correct. If I choose to develop and not choose number 9, just because I can, am I still required to put in 20% that we require nonetheless?
Yes. For inclusionary zoning, yes.
Okay.
And since you brought this up, quick thing for you guys in your consideration. We do have another section of our code written by my wonderful predecessor who set 35% affordability requirements for motel conversions. And that has not stopped anyone from coming in to do so, just as an aside.
Thank you, Hannah. Okay, so my discussion point with what I just heard with the 20%, I'd like to go back to 70. Because it's your choice if you want to do it or not. You can still do 3, 2, 4 others and still have to give us 20% of whatever you build. This is just a little icing on the cake if somebody chooses this. So I would stick to 70.
Ask you a question.
Absolutely not. Okay, what would you like?
No.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm in that mood. What do you need?
Vice Pro Tem.
So I think that if you look at two developments like BLD and Bell Rippey, if you go down that list and go, is this checking a rando box just to check a box, and does it make sense for the development? Detached single family dwelling doesn't make sense either one of those.
Not at all.
Accessory dwelling units doesn't apply. Duplex, right? Two family dwelling doesn't apply.
No, it does. 100%.
So you plop in a duplex.
Not 20%.
20 or 25%.
20 or 25%. It depends how many you,
Right.
so BLD 300 units, that would be 20, four different 25%.
For number 3, 2 family dwellings is at 25%.
Yes, of 2 family dwellings. 25% of
I see.
300 units.
I see. Okay.
And so out of 300, 20%, you still get 60 deed restricted units, even if you choose not to do the 70%. So that's why I think
They can be the 2 family, anything they want.
whatever you want. And that's why I think the 70 should stay.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
So I cannot support the motion unless we switch it to 70.
We have to get another amendment.
I guess I would put that question back with that explanation. Councilor Godus, how do you feel about going back to 70?
Let me give you a green there, Councilor Godus.
I'd love to call the question and just see what kind of support this has. And then I don't. I think there's just not enough real options. And so I think, bringing that down to something that is a real option is important to the motion. So I'm good with my second, and I'd love to just call the question, just see if there's support for it.
If I could just
Thank
say
you,
one thing.
Councilor Godus. Right, you wanted 10 seconds. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just to help Councilor Weimer, because I get the philosophical, like it should just be easier to be flexible. The discussions have been one, we saw what happened with 213, right? Was it SB or HB? SB, HB,
And a
SB.
bill.
It's coming back around. We're hopeful that there will be more interaction, but I will tell you that the discussions have all been, they want to see this prescriptive options laid out. That's what they're looking for. They want to see that. And the more that we can show the statewide discussion that especially mountain resort communities are very progressive and are not just getting started, but have already been at this for a while and are moving that goalpost forward. That's what they're looking for. So that's one of the reasons why from a prescriptive standpoint, we want it explained, because is it weekly now, Hannah? We're getting these cast requests for spreadsheets of who's doing what, and it's literally all these different types of options and who's doing it and how many of these things are you doing and at what level are you requiring it, because we're trying to demonstrate that we are aggressively pursuing affordable housing. So from that perspective, that's why we have to be so prescriptive in our ordinance, not just from the legal standpoint, but because we're trying to demonstrate that we're not just playing. This isn't token.
No,
This is definitely something that we're trying to do. And so while I agree with you, it would be great if we could take each one and go, okay, you're in this type of, it's a 1 acre and it's situated here. And so this would be the best fit. It's difficult for us to then demonstrate our commitment to affordable housing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Kraut, before I let you talk, I had time to think while Dr. Marshall was talking, my time to think. I want to throw out one more compromise and see if Councillor Kraut and Councillor Godus would be interested. Instead of 35, would you go to 50?
Yes, I would accept 50 for the motion. Councillor Godus.
I wouldn't, but I might be in the morning, so the minority, so we might need to do a new motion if that's the case. I'd just like to see how this motion goes.
Fair enough.
Okay, can I ask one question of staff before we call a question? And this speaks to the question that Councillor Weimer had. Hannah, when we have a prescriptive code like this, I believe there's also a section in the code where administratively, if there's a proposal that meets all the intents and purposes of a code and possibly exceeds those, that staff can approve that. Would that apply to this portion of code?
I believe what you're referring to is our alternative compliance sections that we have sprinkled throughout. So I am going up into this to see if we have that included in this section, which yes, we do.
Because that does give some flexibility for Councillor Weimer, which might make that a little more palatable.
It is a section that speaks to someone who sees what is required in code and actually can tell us that they can meet the intent better than what we have prescribed.
Right.
So, I mean, we think about this in simpler terms of like, we prescribe what building materials you can use in a development. And I'm not going to say that I keep up with the latest technology of building materials. So if something new comes out on the market and it's this amazing thing, a developer can come to us through alternative equivalent compliance and say, I have this project or product that meets your standard and exceeds it. So it's meeting the intent and then some. It would be a hard argument to make for this type, but I'm not saying they couldn't. I'm not saying they wouldn't be able to make the argument. And then as you have proposed to change that threshold to 25, which would be projects that are seen by city council, that could be an alternative equivalent compliance discussion at this dais as well.
Thank you, Hannah. Are you good, Shelley? Yep. Okay. Councillor Schachter, please.
Well, I was just going to ask, since it came up, we're doing plenty of discussion on the alternative equivalent compliance. Another example I thought about, we have a huge need in town for childcare. It's extremely tricky in terms of expense and building. We haven't codified it, which may come up in our discussion later. But in theory, Hannah, if you could tell us, let's say a developer came and had a significant, whatever size it is, and couldn't quite meet the 9 criteria exactly. But as part of their proposal, they said, look, in lieu of this, I want to put in a childcare daycare facility in lieu of a couple of these developments. It meets your code, it meets your community goals. I'm not saying you'd approve it, but is that something that could fall under the alternative equivalent compliance as an example?
That's a very interesting example.
It's a great example.
I mean, your attorney would flex the code a little bit on that and probably say, yeah, we're trying to get it in front of you guys for
It could fall under that.
It could fall under, yeah, no,
Okay.
I mean, that's one of those great examples where when we're sitting down and talking, we try to be creative to especially get the concept in front of you guys so you can.
I just bring that up because, hey, we have the need. Shelley raised it, and it might help Commissioner Weimer also with his acceptance of the process.
Right.
And I will say that our childcare zoning is something that Planning and Zoning Commission will be looking at the end of the month for specifically the same reasons why we have a housing crisis, we have a childcare crisis
Correct.
as well. So we are looking at flexibility for those types of implementations.
Excellent. All right, thank you. So the motion was made about 20 minutes ago. We had about 4 or 5 changes. Is everybody clear on the motion, the way it stands?
Could we get a rehash, please?
Thank you, Carl.
Yeah, so
Took
it's the
notes.
right thing.
I kind of have a vague idea, but.
Okay, so in the primary changes to the ordinance as presented are on page 7, under 3, underneath the 9, is that we would the inclusion of 3 different bedroom count configurations would remain at 10% of the total dwelling units, which is number 7. Number 9, the 70% would be reduced to 35% of the total number of units deed restricted to an average of 100% area median income. And then the third change, and I don't have the exact code section, would be with regard to the exemption for meadows, is to clarify that it is applicable only to non-entitled development underneath the ADA. In other words, if it exceeds the current ADA entitled total number of units, this would be applicable to it. Those that were entitled underneath the ADA, which is essentially the remaining 150 detached for sale units that are required out there as the next phase, would not be subject to this.
And I think the last one was the 800 down to 80. The
Actually,
typo.
it wasn't, because the 800 was in the staff report and was not in the actual ordinance itself.
Great, fantastic.
And I have a point of clarification. When Counselor Kaup said I accept the 50, did she rescind?
No,
No, that wasn't it. The second.
the second was not accepted.
What I just listed, that's the motion.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so
I took all that, nope, I already took that all into account.
okay, sounds good.
All right, everybody clear? It looks like it. I call for the question. I don't know where to vote.
I have to do roll calls.
Oh. I don't have a button. No, I don't have a button. Where's the button?
Didn't light up.
Counselor Kaup,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dame,
No.
Counselor Weimer. Counselor Schachter,
Yes.
Counselor Zelinski,
Yes.
Counselor Godis. It passes 4-2.
We would have had it next go around. All right, excellent. Motion passes the way it stands. Fantastic. It's all good. It's all good. That's what council wanted. That's fine. Let's do it. Sounds good. Thank you, Hannah.
Just for clarification for Counselor Weimer, I will buy his drinks, but nobody else's.
We have 3 minutes to wrap this up, guys. All right, well, I want to thank you, Hannah, for all of this, and the whole planning department. Thank you, Carl and Beverly, for all of this. And also thank you, council, for talking about this and trying to figure this out. Very good. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much. Moving on, item 13, ordinance, another ordinance, 2023-12, amending section 110.030, disaster emergency services. Point of order, Councilor Godis.
I move we continue all the items to the next meeting, adjourn immediately.
Immediately.
Is there a second?
We just immediately put all the items on the consent agenda after the fact.
Yeah.
Say yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Funny. All good. Okay, back to disaster emergency services.
Good afternoon. Do you want me to do it?
That's you.
Okay, so we had an interesting, the code, with regard to disaster, emergency services. It was kind of antiquated. It appointed the mayor to be in charge of everything. Turns out most elected mayors really don't want to be in charge of every emergency response that occurs in town. Yeah, and we have a whole series of professionals on our staff that do that for a living. And to Beverly's credit, when she showed up, she looked at that code section and said, Carl, I think it'd be a good idea if we fix this. So what you have in front of you is actually relatively straightforward changes. the other places is important is as we go through these planning processes with other disaster, with CDOT, with state, all of that, they want to be able to point back to the authority, who has authority to declare emergencies, when they have that authority, and who's on their call down list essentially, and that's what this creates. So that's really all this is doing. Happy to answer any other questions, but that's it in a nutshell.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions? We'll see none. Anybody from the public like to comment on the emergency services disaster? No, see none. Close the public portion, bring it back to council, entertaining a motion in ordinance 2023-12. And we got Councillor Godus.
I move we approve ordinance 2312, amending section 110.030 disaster emergency service.
And second, Councillor Schachter.
Second the motion.
Thank you. Any more discussion? What do you want? No? Yeah, I know. So I call for the question.
Counselor Schachter,
Yes.
Counselor Weimer,
Yes.
Counselor Kaup,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dame,
Yes.
Counselor Zelinski,
Yes.
Counselor Godus.
Yes.
It passes unanimous 6-0.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. Moving on, 14, resolution 2023-20, short-term rental license fees. Emery.
Emery Langston, Planner, Community Development. So this is a resolution for consideration to increase short-term rental permit fees and accessory tourist rental permit fees. So this was discussed at the previous city council meeting, and this resolution has moving the initial permit fee for short-term rentals from 500 to 600, and then the renewals from 300 to 400. And then likewise for the accessory tourist rental permits, moving it to the initial one would be 360, and then renewals at 180. And then also just point out in section 4, it then would also peg any future increases to the consumer price index for Denver each year. So.
Okay, thank you. Any questions to staff? See none. Since this is a resolution, we won't have a public portion to this, so we'll bring it right back to council, entertaining a motion in resolution 2023-20. Councilor Schachter.
Sure. I would move regarding resolution 2023-20 regarding the amendment of short-term and accessory tourist rental license fees, that we accept the resolution as presented by staff and legal.
Thank you. And Councilor Godus.
Second.
And a second. Motion by Councilor Schachter, second by Councilor Godus. Any discussion?
I have some comments, but I think I'd like to bring something back to council at a future date. So I'll maybe mention that in council comments and not as part of this motion. I pulled it off to mention that because it relates to this, but I'll save it. I'll reserve it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. If there's no more discussion, I'll call for the question.
Counselor Godus.
Yes.
Counselor Zelinski.
Yes.
Counselor Kaup,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dame,
Yes.
Counselor Weimer,
Yes.
Counselor Schachter.
Yes.
It's unanimous. It passes.
Thank you, Ryan. Moving on to 15, item 15, update on economic development incentives. And that's Danielle talking to us. There she is.
We do have a small presentation, so just give me one sec.
Danielle Campbell, Economic Development and Community Development. I just have a quick update and hopefully discussion point, which I think will, based upon council's direction on the last council meeting, when we were discussing the downtown overlay, there was a lot of conversation around the GID, General Improvement District, as well as economic incentives, especially considering, when we're talking about regulation, what are the incentives? And I know a lot of that conversation also occurred during the work session. So I'm hopeful that this will kind of help get us into the right conversation that we should be having, as well as direction to staff, if any. So really quickly, I do want to talk through, I just have a very small presentation, but I want to talk through, the history on the GID, as well as, any changes that have occurred. And then I'll jump into the actual economic incentives that we currently have open and operating today. So first conversation is within the General Improvement District. So this has been around for a long time. It is actually the green boundary. I know it's a little bit difficult to see on the map, but it's also within the packet. So it's that south portion of the Colorado River. So really the intent of this was, when we started in 1982, is really the purpose is for the vitality and vibrancy of downtown. So that is really from the intent of what this district's supposed to do. That was the concept in the resolution in 1982. So when we're talking a little bit more in detail of the GID is, okay, great, that's the intent, but what does it actually do? It really focuses on providing funding, which is currently at a mill levy, which I'll talk about in just a second, but really the purpose is that parking and off-street parking. So if any uses, as we currently know, and I know a lot of folks here understand that whenever we're talking about businesses or residents, a lot of things are required for a different amount of parking. If you are a business or residents within the GID, you are not required to provide parking. So that is what in 1982, the main purpose behind that. However, talking a little bit how the GID has changed since then, in the left image here in the yellow boundary is the is the previous GID district. However, in 2015, we did update that boundary as well as a couple of different items that I'll talk about in just a second. So in 2015, we added exactly 5 parcels to the left here that you can kind of see. So with speaking of this, the intent of this boundary just adds a little bit on the outside. So we're talking about what was actually changed. The real, in 1982, the purpose did not include residential property. Those 5 parcels were residential properties. So that was changed in that resolution. The next thing was allowing serial annexation, because within this district, it operates very similarly to an annexation process. So if properties want to be a part of it, and they want to come together and do that, that is essentially what happened in 2015. With that, as well as parking, eliminating the requirement for parking, we do have a fund. It is a mill levy, so it really changes every year. But on average, we get about $50,000 every year from the whole district. Right now, we have about $228,000 within the GID fund. It's not a whole lot of money. And historically, we've used it on parking studies and different things like that. So we haven't really used it for anything massive, but it is a funding source. And I do want to talk about kind of the why when it comes to parking and kind of why this initial concept. So this is actually a downtown in Salida, Colorado. As you can see in the left picture, that's very much like our town, historic building, and to the right, we have a recessed building with parking in the front. So when we're talking about parking, and I know, parking is a tough subject and every community goes through that. And I understand that. So when we're thinking about this is what happens whenever you require parking, and especially when we're thinking about our main streets and our downtowns, you often get projects like this. And this was a very, very complicated issue currently in Salida. This is like their one big parcel on a major corner where I believe it's a grocery store right now, that they got required parking in the redevelopment and the only place to put it was in the front. So you can kind of see in the below picture of like, if everyone's been to Slida, you can kind of, this is like looking down where all the mountains are. And you can kind of see like all the historic buildings are there, but this is the one project that demoed, something new got put in place. So when we're talking about GID and we're talking about parking and we're talking about, we're thinking about the overlay, we're thinking about pedestrian friendly, this is where parking becomes a really big issue and why the GID has really helped with the vibrancy. Although, of course, there's a lot of other things we can do, as we discussed previously, but very important when we're talking about the GID on why that elimination of parking really helps these projects move forward. So we talked a little bit about the look and feel. Let's talk about parking and the cost. So we're talking about, I kind of pulled just a general example. I just did a very rough estimates of a restaurant in downtown. It's about 1,600 square feet. Currently, as we talked about, no parking is required for that. So let's just, as an example, I pulled it over to North Landing. Obviously, that's a park with the intent, but as a theoretical example, if a restaurant were to go in some type of parcel like that, what it's going to cost, they would be required to have 8 parking spaces, and that's going to cost them $64,000. And that is the fee in lieu. That's part of if someone were to not want to do parking outside of the GID. So not only from a look and feel, does the GID really help with that vibrancy, but from an economic and getting the businesses and the type of vibrancy we want, it also has a major impact that way. So just from again, the look and feel and the financial implications. So just kind of switching gears a little bit, because I do believe this is all very much one topic, but we're talking about business incentives. So what do we do currently right now? Thinking outside of the policy side, but more on the financial side, we really have 2 major mechanisms, which we do have the DDA here today. So if we have any more specific questions around that, but they do provide 2 really amazing grant opportunities. One being the facade improvement grant, as well as design assistance grants. So really it's the idea of anything on the exterior that's within the DDA boundary can apply for this. This, again, let me re-emphasize this. It does not go inside the building. It is only truly facade. The next thing is design assistance grant. So if, the business owner or property owner doesn't really have an idea of what they want to do, they can provide, here's some money to move that forward and get an architect on board. So kind of definitely all as one, but with the goal of getting those improvements done. From our side, from the city side, we currently have a revolving loan fund. And one of the main things that we provide with that is essentially low interest loans. We don't really have a whole lot of funding right now. We have about $10,000 available, but it has been used quite often since the interest rates have gone up. In total, we have about 120,000. However, we've done pretty large amount of loans, around 40,000. So that's kind of why we have just limited money. And a revolving loan fund, just for folks to understand, is any money, it's revolving. So as soon as we get monthly checks from the loans that we have sent out, it goes straight back into the fund. So there's no other use for that funding right now. One of the main things that you can utilize this funding for, really anything outside of touching the physical improvements. And that's just, for example, if we were doing like a brownfield site or something where it would cause like federal restrictions, that's the one thing we just can't use that funding for, but really incredibly flexible. So previously, we used to do a sales tax rebate program. This was started in early 2000s. I will say it has expired in 2022, and only 11 businesses really use this. This kind of goes to the point of a sales tax rebate program. It really helped with larger scale businesses. So the reason why it wasn't renewed is because we haven't had interest in it in over 5 years. And the last person that utilized it only got around $300 back. And so that was, again, before my time, but that was kind of the intent on possibly rethinking of what this could be used for. However, obviously with the turnover within the city, we haven't really moved forward past that, but that is where it stands right now. And that's all I have for business incentives as well as GID information. So I'll kind of leave it up to you guys.
The one thing I would add, just because I know it's going to be a question, is how do you expand the GID? That has to be done by petition by the property owners. So you can't unilaterally push that out. They have to ask to come in.
Exactly.
And that's what happened with those residential properties. They just recognized they were in a transition zone. The kind of redevelopment of their properties, a lot of professional offices in particular looking at utilizing it, stand in that office kind of professional core. They wanted to be able to not have to deal with the parking issues surrounding that, because it would really, on those kind of smaller lots, would be impossible to accomplish. So they requested to come in, and council made, sitting as the board of the GID, council made the decision to expand the boundary on that petition.
That's it? Yep. Excellent. All right, any questions? Let's start with Councilor Shack.
Of course, thank you. And a couple things. What is the tax rate? Is it a mill levy?
It's a mill levy, so it really fluctuates every year. For us to change that mill, I believe would have to go to a vote.
I mean, is it fair? It looks like it's fairly nominal.
It is.
Based on the dollars you have. So the next logical place would be 6th Street, it seems. But other than involving them in both taxes and some funding benefits, in terms of the Salida example, what would be the interaction now with the new, if assuming the overlay passes, that parking issue is moot, is that correct?
It sort of, as it stands right now, if we move forward with the overlay, it is currently a reduction of 50%. So it's not an elimination of parking, but you're correct that it does lower that.
And it also requires parking in the rear, does it not? The overlay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So the advantage, should they opt in, would be, hey, we're going to self-fund some benefits perhaps. The next question, the third question I had, and it's more as economic development, and it's a little different than the GID. It seems to me personally that funds to help business, and we're talking about appearance and facades, might be better allocated. We don't have much discretion. Oh, I see Steve left the room. He's probably going to get ill. We don't have much room, but it seems like south and west of town are the areas that need the most help in terms of appearance, parking, and help, whereas we're in pretty good shape down here. Just that's combination comment question. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor Salinsky.
So just to clarify for Counselor Shatner, those are DDA funds, so it's got to be in that district, and that's why that's specific to that. Because I have a friend who was going to put in a new sign and fix her parking lot, and she is literally across the street on the wrong side from the boundary. So, it would entail us creating a different program, different district, finding another funding source to develop, do facade improvements to the south or something. But I mean, it's a pretty vibrant program. I've used it personally for my buildings. I've recommended it to a lot of other people. And that's part of why our downtown looks nice. Yeah. And so, I think these things are all great. As far as the parking, I would encourage, I mean, if you, when the comments came in on how 6th Street can't get the type of businesses that they want, then I would propose to them that they petition to either get into the GID, and that could be an option, and then that kind of absolves us of that concern. Or, we look at some different incentives and see if there's something that we can do incentive wise to kind of entice that. But I think the lowest hanging fruit would be to expand the GID, encourage them to petition to be included into the GID. And then that would get that kind of feel going across the river.
Thank you, Councilor Cow. He's right there. Councilor Cow.
Oh, thank you. I have mixed feelings about the GID. On one hand, I very much appreciate how it discourages taking up valuable space downtown for parking, and I totally agree with that. But it also relieves the developer and the building owner of any burden for cost of parking. And the way that the GID is set up, it really does not generate any type of significant income to help with parking. So that puts all of the burden for the cost of parking onto the city, which is not sustainable. And especially in this day and age when most of the mountain towns throughout Colorado have paid parking and have implemented paid parking in their downtowns. I'm just wondering, I don't know how I could support expanding the GID unless we did some other things along with that as part of our TDM program, possibly looking at having a shuttle that services the tourist attractions in the downtown area, and looking at implementing paid parking to help to generate funding to help with our TDM program and help with shuttles so that we can reduce the need for parking downtown and we can move people and bring visitors downtown without their cars. So I struggle with this. I see how it's valuable, but I also want it to pay for itself.
All right, thank you. Councillor Godus.
Yeah, I think Shelley has great points. I don't necessarily want to see more surface or multi-story parking garages downtown, but $8,000 doesn't do it. And I'm struck with the 8,000 isn't enough. If you, for example, you're requiring 8 spots, 64,000 on once one of those lots gets redeveloped, Burns lot or Stomach Canyon, whatever, when that gets redeveloped, 64,000 is like a rounding error in the size and scope of a redevelopment. So I think I don't care to have the conversation right now. I'd love to hear from staff about what that would look like. I know a while ago, I thought 40,000 was the price per parking spot. I suspect it's a little higher now, but then asking, say 50,000 a spot. Now, if you're requiring 10 spots or so, now that might be the deal breaker. So somewhere between the $8,000 token amount of, oh, that's cute and that doesn't do anything, and the $50,000 spot fee in lieu of, which would kill a redevelopment. Maybe there's 30,000 where we can go to the public and say, yeah, it's not quite the cost, but it's much, much better. So I would love to re-examine those fees in the future.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I have a quick one, mainly on the economic incentives for business. What's the biggest complaint? What's the most expensive aspect of starting a business where people go, you just made it impossible for me to start my business?
Well, Matt will yell at me later.
I know he will, but I want to know.
System improvement fees.
Which is?
So system improvement fees, and I might look to Hannah to help me out here, or Emery if he's still around. Essentially, it's water and sewer. So if a building historically has never been, let's say, a restaurant, and a restaurant decides to come in due to the usage of water and sewer and restrooms and ADA accessibility, those kinds of things, system improvement fees can be incredibly expensive. We oftentimes, whenever you put together the parking costs as well as a system improvement fees, businesses will end up not opening
because of
that. And so, the parking is costly. We're talking about, for example, the example I gave of 64,000, but on top of that, if you've never had a restaurant or retail space there, putting that, you're talking 70, 75, higher. I mean, depends how big it is, so I can't give a rough number.
Quick question, you mentioned retail as well. Restaurants make sense because it's a completely different use of the space if you, and the kitchen alone is unaffordable, but retail,
It
why is
depends.
there?
You know, I would have to look at Hannah for it, because every use has a different EQR number.
So
So
a
it
clothing
depends,
store
it's
that doesn't
dependent.
have any new faucets or toilets or anything.
So we do have some businesses that struggle more than others in our categories when we apply system improvement fees, and it really is based on how much water we calculate that they're using. So salons are one of our most problematic ones. It's based on hair stations that can be really expensive. Retail is not super high up there. Some medical office, so, and how we categorize what a medical office is has been challenging. So depending on what type of business you are and where we categorize how much water you use, you can come in as a 2-chair hair salon owing quite a bit of money, and it's prohibitive.
40 grand, 50 grand?
But I would also just state so that Steve doesn't have a heart attack in the back of the room. You know, these funds do go to supporting services provided by the city. So just take that under consideration as well.
I totally understand that, but I guess where I'm getting at is there any incentives to be had there? Can we think about something, because that's very prohibitive to almost any small business that people I know
Yeah.
that want to.
So at one time we had, I can't remember when in the mid 2000s, it kind of went away. What I would call in other communities, we call an ESTA program, an enhanced sales tax incentive program. And essentially it's a share back on sales tax to cover some of those upfront costs that you have to front. So that is one way to do it, where your success is determined by your success, right?
Sure.
And it's very similar to, you know, we have done that, have done very similar deals for larger developments when, you know, they have a large gap to cover, they're bringing in new sales tax dollars that we haven't seen before. We do a share back on that. I think that's an area, because you know, so that Matt and Steve and Beverly don't scream about rating the utility funds.
Absolutely.
It's a way to, if those utility, you know, if those payments are made up front, and then you can essentially, you know, you know, whatever you make, say we share back 50% of your sales tax dollars, as long as you're remitting on time and you're in compliance, you know, over a period of say 5 years, that was what the old program was. It's a way that at least you can count on, if you do well, you're going to see that money back without hitting the utilities so hard.
Is that what expired that you mentioned?
It is a little bit, the one issue I will say, and Carl, you'll probably know definitely more than I do about this, is that the boundary, you have to have a specific number of contractors that are local, as well as purchasing supplies that are local. There's a radius, and you have to provide the exact paperwork of where you purchased everything, where you did all of that. So for example, we would get a binder probably like hay thick, just to prove, have all that documentation. And this is where the issue is for the bigger guys, not so bad. It's pretty simple to do something like that. For the smaller folks that are trying to just get the doors open, incredibly complicated.
Can we rethink this?
Yeah, no, and honestly, the original program that we had didn't have all of that. That kind of developed over time. I really think that, and I would say Silverthorne has a really great example of an ESTA program where it's about 5 lines in the code that says, you know, council's willing to consider it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it gives you guys the authority for somebody to come in and request that deal, whether they're small or big. And I find it's a, you know, especially in an area where we're trying to encourage retail, it is a good partnership, because you are sharing in their success, if you will, or they're sharing in your success, however you want to think about that. So I find it a real positive, because it creates a partnership between the town and whoever the vendor or retailer is.
I would love to see something like this again for economic development. So. Councilor Weimer.
And would council be supportive of thinking about some of these incentives as part of the overlay? As we're trying to incentivize turnover and create those first floor storefronts that we're trying to drive? Is there a room for incentives there?
It's not a bad idea. Yeah, I know. I'm processing. Counselor Schachter.
I guess it'd be a question, Carl, Danielle, others. Have we looked at the EQR costs to businesses based on size and otherwise compared to other towns that are competing for our retail, Rifle, Silverton, Durango, Silverthorne, and others, Eagle? Have we done that?
We're actually getting ready to be doing our cost analysis. And part of what they look at is what we call connection and capacity charges. So it would be the impact of a business joining into our system or creating a situation where now we have to upsize our system. So we are currently going through that process. And so they'll be looking at that and making recommendations for all of those associated fees.
We're looking at communities like ours that are competing for retail? Is that
Well,
what we're doing? To
they're-
see what their fees are?
Well, the way it works is it's not necessarily how do we stack up against other agencies, although that is a piece of it. It's really what is the cost of us? So if we were to compare ourselves to a community that had a different size, their pipes were different size, or their water facility or their wastewater facility were different sizes, it wouldn't matter what their rates are because there is a certain economies of scale based on the size of the system. But they do look at that, and that is something when you go to adopt those fees, you can look at those comparators. But what you want to do is make sure that you're capturing the cost of it, not only for buying into the benefit that is already in place, but putting money toward the improvements that are needed.
I understand that.
So all of that is being looked at now.
But it would also maybe from a perspective point, once we do that, we say, yeah, our fees are fair relative to our current cost and our infrastructure. I see that's critical and Steve would want that very much. At the same time, it would help us to say, hey, what does it cost? What does it cost somebody to put in a 1,000-foot retail place in Glenwood versus some of the other places? Okay, we may be able not be able to adjust our EQR because we're going to lose money for the next 30 years. But what else can we do? And I don't know if we know that, or if we do know it, we'd love to hear it.
Well, once we get that cost analysis done so that we are bringing that forward to you all for discussion about what those fees will look like, we can also have some comparator information for you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Solinsky.
So I love the rebate idea. I think, I'm always going to be pro-business in any possibility. Another thing I was curious about, and I'm going to bring up that stupid dental office again. How can we regulate? Vacant storefronts are a concern. Businesses that are never open have to be a concern too. And so I think like in our business district, like how do you start to have some regulatory standards and where do we have any teeth in that matter?
Oh, I saw what you did there.
I'm so clever. Because I think that's a huge concern. Like you talk about, like, what are the barriers to businesses? And I think sometimes it's like being solo, for a period of time. That's one of the reasons that John and I bought the building next door to us to put in another store that by all intents and purposes competed with our existing store because we were the only retail in a block, and so that's a barrier right there. You can't, and everybody else kind of controls and everybody's independent and that's great. But then we have to have some sort of a like intentional mix of businesses that we're trying to court and develop and expand to, and then like attracts like, and then suddenly it takes its own momentum. But we got to figure out some way to get that started.
It's very difficult on a regulatory side because you're really stepping into the world of, how do I use my private property in a very fundamental way? And it is a problem. I mean, I'm seeing it in some of the other resort communities right now. Investors are coming in and buying up properties and then they're just sitting vacant because they're just going to hold them until they're worth even more. Right. And so we're seeing a lot of dark storefronts on some main streets and a lot of mountain resort communities right now across the West. I think actually what you guys did is one of the best ways that happens is a really strong private business side, community of businesses, and whether that's facilitated through the DDA or otherwise, to kind of encourage and motivate that change. It's going to be really, I mean, other than some economic incentives, there's not a lot we can do to push the issue of you have to have your store open or you have to have somebody in it. Because there's not a differential rate for vacant property versus non, those kinds of things in terms of taxation. There's no structural way to get at it really right now.
Yeah. Maybe that's something we put like in our pocket for future kind of examination. How can we encourage that?
Thank you. And Councilor Godus.
That's something very profound to say.
That's why I write notes down.
I know. Yep.
Oh, not even anything?
Wow.
Nothing. Danielle, you got any? Yeah. Danielle, you got anything else?
Just as a really quick, just for thoughts, I guess, is whenever we have the conversations with businesses, specifically around the system improvement fees, whenever, like I kind of mentioned, is that, if restaurant to restaurant, that's fine. However, if a restaurant or some change of use has never been in that building before, that's when these charges happen and occur. The one thing that we really struggle with is the business that's leasing the space will get are the ones that are going to pay for it, but it stays with the building.
Yeah.
So that's the big, let's say, barrier we often see with stuff like this. And so we'll be having the conversations with the businesses and they've already have signed a lease or something to that extent. Obviously, we try our best to get the word out and do all of those things. But it does, that's where the real impact is.
Thank you. And looks like Councilor Godus remembered.
Yes. So all about incentives, I think a lot of the incentives we have are great. I just want to remind everybody though, that every incentive we give to an entity, a business, every grant we give to a nonprofit comes at the expense of someone else somewhere else. So these tax breaks are not tax breaks, they're giveaways, you win the lottery, and some other person has to sacrifice. So they're entity. So for every tax rebate we give, every facade grant we give, every, there's shabbier carpet at the rec center. There's an HVAC system at the rec center that isn't balanced and is costing us a lot of carbon. So let's just, as we think about giving away all these things, let's just remember that it does come at a cost, and that cost isn't recognized a lot, I don't think so.
Thank you. Councilor Selinsky.
All right, so to your point, yes, but it's an investment in future gains. So that's how I look at that.
That's right.
And then that goes back to what I was going to say about, the improvements to the building, because this is something I thought about a lot. I've always wondered why anybody would lease a space and then sink $80,000 into a build out.
Yeah.
Realizing the return on that investment is like way out there. So maybe there's some sort of a program that other communities have done or that we could develop where it's encourages the building owner to participate. Maybe there's some sort of an incentive or some sort of I don't even know how that would look, where they would augment, maybe a rental break for a period of time for leasehold improvements. And then the building owner could be encouraged to do that by the city. And then it would create a little bit more of partnership there. And I don't know if there's any sort of a program or an incentive or some way that you could do that where it becomes, me as the landlord, I give a little, the tenant gives a little, the city gives a little, and everybody gains for it.
I think if you did that, you could go on tour. Because in 13 years of dealing with these kinds of things, I have yet to see a building owner cough up a dime for a leaser. So if you come up with what that partnership is, I think lots of communities would be very interested in that, because the onus ends up being on whoever's leasing it. And I have spent a lot of time talking to commercial realty companies saying you really need to educate the people who are looking into these programs, that before the moment they sign that lease, they need to find out what their obligations are. Because it's very much an educational program to make sure, because then before they sign the lease is when they have the most leverage. And so we need to really educate the business community of what to look for in a lease, how to negotiate that lease, and really how to get the most out of it so that they're not on the hook for everything. Because after the fact, it's really difficult.
I really asked you that when we were doing our business plan. So, I would say like even as an economic development arm of our city government, we should encourage people to use those resources.
Right.
To it, when they're coming to you for a business license, whatever it is, however that works, I don't know how we as a community can do better. But the resources are there, and the way I see most businesses fail is that the enthusiasm, the idea, the concept is there, but they just don't have the processes and the knowledge, and they fail to pay rents.
And the capital.
And it's, it's soul crushing. So, yeah.
Thank you.
There you go.
Anything else from council staff about this? No, all good? Okay. Let's wrap this up and get into council comments, and we'll start with Councilor Shack.
Well, I have actually a question. Oh, sorry.
He's not lit yet. Just I'll do it. Just,
There you go.
you got it.
It's a question that came up as I was driving around and looking at the big red scar over at the Meadows. And I was wondering, it's too late now in this case, but do we require in projects like this a reclamation bond? Should they go belly up? Have we ever done that? Do we do that?
Actually.
I don't recall from P and Z, and it just struck me
I don't
pretty
either.
hard the other day.
Can you restate your question? one more
Yes. At some level of project, i.e. like the Meadows or any others where there's a significant amount of displacement and scar, do we require some kind of reclamation bond prior to the project beginning?
So we do have, as part of all development agreements, we have a bond for public improvement costs and I don't think that's what you're talking about, but I'm going to start there.
No.
So really, you're talking more about restoring the land?
Yeah,
Is that
let's
what you're
say,
concerned about?
let's say theoretically,
Yeah.
a project that size goes belly up and we're left with a huge scar, just like mines and quarries.
Mhm.
A reclamation bond of
Apparently we
significant
don't.
dollars,
I was giving myself some time.
a reclamation bond of significant dollars should we be able to do it?
We take a bond for public improvements. We don't take a bond for landscaping or reseeding, which is a requirement in our approval process. So I'm going to kick this one over to Carl because no. I
Yeah, we
think
don't
we
currently
one
have,
for it.
although I am seeing it, I've amended 2 different sets of codes to include essentially reclamation bonds. Yeah, for that reason, we ended up with a couple of big holes in the community for a while. Like, the pushback you'll hear is it's an additional cost of development. We just had a discussion on reducing from 70 to 35% to make development more viable. This is something that we would get pushback on as well. But I think it has real value in terms of requiring some type of restoration bond to be in place or letter of credit based on a reasonable engineer's estimate of, filling in the hole and reseeding.
I think it's worth considering, again, depending, with some size parameters, perhaps, and particularly since we're pushing hillsides left and right, and I understand the bonds are not pennies on the dollar, but
It's usually about 10%.
okay.
So
Anyway, that was my.
Yeah, no,
observation.
absolutely. And I think it's a worthwhile discussion, and I didn't frame it quite that well, but I was thinking kind of the
Thank
same
you.
thing as I drove by and was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Councilor Schachter. Councilor Cow. No comments tonight. Thank
No
you.
comments.
Thank you, Councilor Cow. Councilor Weimer.
2 things. If I've not driven by the 8th and Midland vacant lot, staring at the lot necessarily, but if it is in fact needing some maintenance, could we see what we could do to get it mowed or something? I don't even know what shape it's in, but it came up before.
Until she comes again. I was.
Okay.
Why don't you just,
Just stay there.
So it was actually something that had occurred to me, the parcel is still in city ownership.
Let's
and,
take care of it.
I was going to have some discussions to see what we could do about the weeds.
Bar. Thank you.
Or flowers, there's some flowers there.
that's right,
Go around the flowers,
that's
please.
right. Make it pretty.
The second, some of you may wonder what Trent Hyatt has been up to.
No.
Well, I don't have a complete picture. I do know that he's now on the River Commission. Yes.
Oh, cool.
So that's a pretty cool.
Oh, that is cool.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Councilor Gotis. No, you first.
So Beverly emailed all of us earlier today. I don't know if they had a chance to read it, but Senator Hickenlooper's staff has requested that we Jeanette Sankel asked if we at CAST would support the Prepare Act. And if you haven't had a chance to read it, and it came out this morning, so we couldn't get it in the packet, and I doubt that anybody's read it, but in a nutshell, what it is that it is 45 states have in some degree marijuana legalization, whether it's medical, whether it is therapeutic, whether it is fully legal. And so, but at the federal level, we still are in 1937 when they criminalized it, and we're treating it like a Schedule I drug. And that is incredibly problematic. And the reason I brought it before this council, one is because they need to have resolutions by July 14th. We don't have another meeting before then. So if we would like to take a position of support, and I'm advocating that we do, because we do have, I think, about 10 businesses in this community that still have to do things like deal in cash, interstate commerce. This Prepare Act is a lot more than just work. It's a commission that is going to form federal regulations and a framework so that states can more easily work in this industry that is now legal in 45 of 50 states. So I think it would be useful to the state of Colorado. I think it'd be useful for the 9-10 marijuana businesses that make up some sector of our economy that contributes to it. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, just take my word for it, I guess. Because we don't have another opportunity. We don't have another an opportunity unless we want to send it back. But I'd love to get a motion of support for this that I can give to the senator's staff so that they can have this and be able to better advocate for the marijuana industry and the businesses that comprise a large part of our economy. Yeah, well, yeah, he's a sponsor of this bill.
Is there any support from the industry itself for this?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is driven by the industry. It is a bipartisan bill. It has support on both sides because it impacts almost every state.
John, I did look at it briefly and quickly. I hate.
Mike,
Sorry.
thank you,
Sorry. Pro Tem.
Mike.
I looked at it fairly cursory because we got it so late. It looked a little bit more in depth that I can absorb. But my real question is, why are we, and you help me, why are we jumping ahead of the feds in terms of banking and legalizing it? What's the benefit of this?
Well,
other than other senators lobbying in Congress.
Yeah, so we jumped ahead of the feds 10 years ago when we legalized it in Colorado. But what that did was create this conundrum where we have now, like it or not, support it or not, we have an industry that is very similar when it became recreationally available. It's very similar to alcohol. But yet it's treated still at the federal level like a criminal enterprise. And so we're not getting ahead. We're allowing the federal government to regulate it. And it says in the summary, you probably read it, where it's just, let's get together people from National Institute of Health, the FDA, the IRS, alcohol, tobacco, firearms.
Recommend how they regulate.
So this is not saying, here's what we're going to do. It is, can we get a commission together within 60 days for the next, I think, 18 months to study this, to make regulations on how to treat this industry essentially like alcohol. And the reason I'm bringing it before us is because, again, like it or not, we do have a section of our economy that is there. When we talk about
burdensome regulations or reasons people don't go into business or things that prevent people from being successful in business, having to deal in all cash and having safes and the crazy stuff that has to go on with our marijuana industry in town is one of those things.
So are you aware right now, because this is coming to us fast and furious, are you aware of any significant pushback to this?
I am not aware of any. I'm sure that there is opposition from senators and congresspeople that have moral and philosophical opposition to the marijuana industry. But as far as I know, none of our senators or congressional representatives do. That's not to say that that's just as far as I'm aware. And again, Senator Hickenlooper is a sponsor of this. So if it was Senator Daines or Senator somebody else, I wouldn't probably bring this up even as worthy as it is, but it was asked of me to bring before Colorado Association of Ski Towns. We have this meeting tonight. I thought I'd throw it out to give us an opportunity. If we don't feel like we've had enough time to really digest and weigh in on the impacts, I think that that's absolutely fine.
Any other councils that you're aware of that have supported this?
It literally just came up
Just came
today.
out.
Yeah.
I think it's a little premature.
That's what I was saying.
Excuse
I'm
me.
not super comfortable, like, taking a stance on something I'm completely ignorant of.
Mhm.
So that's my.
Okay.
that's my thought.
Sorry. Anything else? Nope. Okay. And Council Sue?
Wait, you had
I'll say that.
Yeah. Council Sue?
No, I got
Nothing. Awesome. I have like 20 comments, but I forgot every single one of them. I didn't write them down, so they'll come over the next few months. Yes, and so we'll move into city manager update.
No,
No.
So I did want to bring up something. I'm going to go to, so I get this correct because I don't want to misspeak. So y'all have probably saw an article about a certain police officer who graduated from the FBI National Academy, which, yeah, you know, and it was kind of a big deal. And since he happens to be the assigned officer for tonight's meeting, because the chief is out, I did want to give him an opportunity to just give you a quick hit on what it was like, the importance of it, and just really an opportunity to both his horn and Glenwood Springs, because we had that opportunity to have an officer. So Steve cleared it with him first.
Congratulations, Officer Haslett.
Yes, so. But while we missed him, I think I was here for what, a week before you left, if that, a few days.
I think about 2 days, yes.
Yeah, and so I was like, well, hi, bye. But I will turn it over so he can talk about it.
Thank you. You know, the younger me would have come up and had a whole bunch of funny things. You know, I've got a 45-minute presentation, which actually I do, that I provided to our staff about the National Academy. But what I wanted to touch base on a little bit here is kind of what it is, what it does for the community, what it does for the department, what it does for me personally, professionally. And so I've got just a few things lined out. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. It is late, so if this bleeds into your time, I want to set the timer at 3 minutes. My door's always open. You can always stop by and discuss further. So first of all, what's the FBINA? It's a Federal Bureau of Investigation National Academy. It's an academy set up by the FBI. It's for active law enforcement, both international and national, throughout the US. And it's designed for us to seek enhancement of our credentials, our professional, and, you know, a little bit of mental, physical, and emotional growth in life. It's a 10-week course that is put on at the FBI Academy, which is, they call it Quantico, but it's actually in Stafford, Virginia. Quantico is a small town inside the military base. The FBI Academy is also inside a military base, the Marine Corps. It was established in 1935 by J. Edgar Hoover, and it was designed to bring federal law enforcement and local law enforcement together to share information, ideas, concepts, philosophies, to work together. Essentially, the FBI has a ton of resources because they have a ton of money. But without the support and the information from local law enforcement, they don't generally get into the weeds of what happens at any given location. So if a bank robbery happens, FBI comes in, they handle it because it's federally insured. They had kidnapping across state lines, the feds get involved because they have multi-state jurisdiction. Typically, we will ask their help and they're just sitting there waiting for anything that may come along. Now they've got other things that they can do, terrorism. There's a lot of big things that they work on, but for this program itself, it's designed to keep us working together. Okay. The program is broken up into 3 different sections. There's an academics part, which is sponsored by the University of Virginia. They offer undergraduate, graduate level classes in leadership. There were several options that we had to take. Some of us could earn upwards of 15 credits towards our master's degree, which I took full advantage of. The second part is professional networking. So our class, it's session 286. So we're the 286 session that's been through. We're 238 representatives from 28 different nations, including the US. So there were, 28 nations, including the US. So we had students from Spain, Ecuador, Croatia, Lebanon, to learn all about how they do their policing. It was very comforting to know that our police department is right in line with what every agency is doing nationwide. Now, everyone's got a few different things that they do that are just a little bit different, as do we. So I leaned on a lot of people to get information of how they're doing things, recruiting, retention, discipline, just really anything that helps run a department. And they lean back on ours, small little Glenwood, on what we're doing, because I had a lot of people stop and say, that's awesome. You guys are a department of 27 people and this is what you're doing. I have to have that information and I want to share it. Since departing from the NA, we have had roughly 28 to 30 different conversations, emails going out amongst us, with over 130 replies from agencies, again, through the entire school, about sharing information. And so even though we're gone, we're still constantly in communication. I know if I have something that happens down in Houston, Texas, or Memphis, Tennessee, I have a very high-ranking colleague that will help me in a heartbeat. If you've ever called the Denver Police Department, you will know that you will get a phone tree that is atrocious to try to get to anybody that can really help you. Fortunately, myself and Chief Darris have completed this academy, and between the two of us, we probably have roughly 400 different agencies that we can reach out to, and at a drop of a hat, they'll stop and do what they're doing, or stop what they're doing to help us. The biggest question is, what's my biggest takeaway from this event? And I learned a ton of things. We helped a lot of people. I can go into it forever, but my biggest takeaway is for council to know and for our city manager to know that it has created a very deep appreciation for each and every person in our department. And I don't want to, take away from the rest of the city, but every person in our department pours their heart and soul into our department. They build camaraderie, and they're there to help each other. We have zero, it's relative when you say that we have zero problems, but when you look at what other agencies are dealing with, man, I am just so proud of what we have established here. So thank you for allowing me to go. I know it was funded by the federal government, but you still paid my salary when I was there, and I appreciate that. I could not have completed this journey without the help of Chief Darris and Lieutenant Kimina, as well as every person in our department, but mostly my wife, my kids, who supported me, allowed me to take that time for personal, professional, and physical growth. That's the third part of it, is the physical fitness. And it provided me an opportunity to really work out with some of the best trainers in the world. They're trained by the US Olympic Committee trainers, that they're private trainers that come back to the FBI and they train new agents, they train the National Academy agents, they modify their workouts for the old guys because we were all old guys. And just thank you. I appreciate it.
Again, congratulations.
And if you guys have any questions, feel free. If you want to get out, I totally understand that too.
Any questions? Okay. Very informative. Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to say that, it's always fantastic when you get any sort of recognition for your organization, for your individuals. And I just want to say I'm very proud that tonight, two very important things, the Parks and Recreation. I started when I worked for the city of Berkeley in Parks, Rec and Waterfront. And the city of Berkeley is the inclusionary capital of the world. It started those discussions about free and independent and inclusionary services. So to see something like that at a city of this size is absolutely amazing. And then to also have representation at a national level and being recognized like that, it just makes me very proud to be the city manager here.
Excellent. Thank you. Well said. Mr. Hanlon.
I don't have much. I would say just in preparation for the exec session, it doesn't need to be really long. I thought this meeting would be 2 hours shorter than this. When we originally put it together and it's not a,
I did.
no, it's just, you never know where they're going to go. And so we added a couple of things to the exec session. The discussion on Shoshone, the discussion on RMR that we don't absolutely have to have tonight. If there is the one other item I do need to talk to you guys about. So I just wanted to preface that for the public and anybody else that it could be relatively short if you guys want it to be.
I'd say we finished the agenda. It's that.
No, okay. I was just giving you guys a preview because I know you're like, oh my God, now it's gonna be like 90 minutes for exec session.
Exactly. Exec session. Big deal. No correspondence, I assume. Yeah. So we'll go into executive session. We have an executive session pursuant to CRS 24.